What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Talk. This is episode number 8. We take it a bit of a different turn this time. Usually it's about politics, but this is more of what I like to to talk about, business. I'm here with Mr. Tom Morgan and Mr. Vaughn Sams. The reason I have Mr. Vaughn Sams here because he's the one that set this up for us. So I'm very happy for him to be here. Tom Morgan, I want you to give a bit of an introduction of yourself. So people who aren't familiar could get a little familiar with you.
Sure. I'm from the U.S. I've been in Statia for about 15 years, part of the season, here during the winter months. My history in America is that I spent a good many of my years on the radio with a radio show about investments and the economy. I also had a television show about the same things. And I had a newspaper column that went to quite a number of newspapers in which I could write pretty much about anything I felt like. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, those were sort of sidelines in a sense. But I also was an advisor to people to help them invest their money. In individuals, colleges, churches that had money to invest. And in the course of that, we even got into international investing in that we came to Anguilla, and we had a number of clients in Anguilla, but also we had the Social Security Fund.
Okay.
And invested the money, some of the money in the Social Security Fund. And the same in the island of St. Lucia. We invested quite a bit of the Social Security Fund money in St. Lucia. That is my background. I did an awful lot with my wife, a fellow investment advisor. Mm-hmm. And she is on the island normally with me, not at the moment, but normally with me.
Right.
I wanted to also ask if we take a step back and we go before this. What did you do before? How did you get started in the entire business field?
I started as a writer. I was a writer for the U.S. Navy, trained as a journalist. After I got out of the Navy, I emigrated to New Zealand, and I worked as a writer there. I was an advertising copywriter for quite a few years, and a PR writer. Mm-hmm. And I did an awful lot of writing on the side. At one point, I wrote a lovelorn column, Dear Abby type of column.
Okay.
Tell Tom, it was called.
Do you remember anything from it?
It was painful. It was really painful. Some very sad letters came from people. I also wrote at that point in New Zealand a couple of humorous columns.
Okay.
Satire. And anyway, I stayed in New Zealand until I was about almost 30.
Yeah.
Came back to the U.S. We had a big tragedy in the family, and that tied me down for several years.
Okay.
And then eventually I formed my own company to syndicate my radio show.
Okay.
Created a radio show and television show, and syndicated that to quite a number of stations.
Okay. Sounds good. I wanted to ask you a question where, because you said you went through kind of a tragedy within your family, how much does your mindset play a role in business in general?
I think your mindset is extremely important, or it can be if you want to be extremely successful. Yeah. I often remember that Einstein, the genius, was asked one time, is imagination important? And Einstein, the genius, said, imagination is everything.
Yeah.
And if you expand the definition of imagination, it is any number of thoughts, of course. It's a variety of thoughts. It's a variety of open thinking. It can involve great confidence, self-confidence. So I think how you think about yourself how you imagine yourself is absolutely essential to be successful in business and in any number of endeavors.
Well, of course, Tom, you would have encountered some mentors along your journey. Like, who would you say played a pivotal role while you were trying to formulate your mindset?
My earliest, I had a number of mentors. I've paid attention to the advice from a lot of people over the years. I'll just note a few of them. One is a fellow named Selwyn, and he is in New Zealand, and he's still alive. And I get on Zoom with him or FaceTime from time to time. He was in the advertising agency where I was. And I was about 21, 22 years old. He was considered a wise old man. He was about 28, I think. Anyway, there I was as an advertising copywriter, and suddenly I had an offer from a newspaper to take a job. And it was a very enticing offer because it involved a car. I would have a car, and I would have an apartment, courtesy of the newspaper, and I would edit this newspaper. It was a suburban newspaper. And I couldn't make up my mind. I didn't really want to go into journalism again. I liked advertising. So while I was tossing this question around, trying to make the decision, friends of mine said, go ask Selwyn. Selwyn is very good with young people. Go talk to him. So I made an appointment to see Selwyn. He was an executive in our advertising agency.
Okay.
And Vaughn has heard this story before. So I said to Selwyn, I described my predicament, trying to make this decision. And after I got all through, Selwyn said, so what? I said, well, can you help me, decide whether I should leave advertising and get into journalism?
Yeah.
And he said, you're asking me to decide what you should do? And I said, well, yeah. He said, well, what are your plans? I said, well, that's why I came to you. And he said, you want me to make plans for you?
Yeah.
He said, what are your goals? I said, goals? So he proceeded to, he was playing the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But he was trying to get me to understand the importance of goals.
Yeah.
And I ended up saying things like, you really know where you want to be in 3 years' time in terms of money, salary? He said, yeah, of course I do. Couldn't believe it. I said, you know in 3 years how much money you want to have in the bank? Yeah. Well, that was all news to me. That you could set goals.
Right.
And of course it made a lot of sense once I thought about it.
Yeah.
I was just very slow. So he was a major mentor. Another major mentor was a fellow much later, this when I was about 37, 38 years old. I mentioned the family tragedy. The family tragedy dragged me down for quite a number of years.
Okay.
Really dragged me down. It was a horrible tragedy. My father killed himself.
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear.
And he left me, and it was very sudden, he left me looking after my mother, who was slipping into senility.
Yeah.
He left me looking after my younger brother, who was in high school. He totally disrupted my life. I had to look after his bankrupt business. He owned a hotel, tavern. And suddenly I had to look after that, and I became very bitter.
Yeah.
Very bitter. So I looked after it, I rescued it, my wife and I. And then I had to stay in the area, and there was no writing work in the area. I had immigrated back to New York.
Yeah.
And I just remained bitter for a long time. And I took a job, it was a marketing job, and I didn't really like it, and I got into a rut. And while I was in that rut after several years, I met a guy in Detroit. He represented our firm in that part of the country. And I would see him once a year, maybe once every 8 months or something. And he was an agent representing my company to, in those days, the Walmart of those days, it was Kmart.
Yeah.
Okay, I
remember
remember that.
That I can remember.
And Kmart was king.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the trust of Kmart.
Yeah.
He was like an employee. He would walk into Kmart and everybody bowed to him. Anyway, he was a very special guy. He had handmade suits, handmade shoes. He was a man of quality. He
Yeah.
belonged to the very best clubs.
Yeah, yeah.
And he, after a while, said to me once, "You're in a rut, aren't you?" And I said, yeah. He said, "You're in a rut." He said, "I was in a rut one time,
Yeah.
and somebody got me out of it." And he told me the story. He said a guy tried to convince him to listen to some motivational materials.
Yeah.
In those days, it was tape.
Right.
Yeah.
Audio books,
Yeah.
audio tapes.
And motivational tapes.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
Get
right.
your head in order to
Yeah.
inspire you, to
Mhm.
help you think better about yourself.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. So the next year when we got together, he said, "You're still in that rut."
Yeah.
And he told me the story that when the guy said to him, "You're in a rut," he said, "Yeah, I am in a rut." And the guy said to him, "If you start listening to these tapes and you really listen to them every day, if you listen like an hour a day,
Yeah.
in 30 days they will change your life dramatically." He said, "I listened to them for 30 days, and in 30 days it changed my life dramatically." He said, "I got out of that rut.
Wow.
I began to see myself differently. I became a tremendous agent
Yeah.
at Kmart. I began to see myself as the best.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had never done that before."
Yeah.
So he told me that story, and he said, "You're in a rut, Tom. You listen to tapes for 30 days, it will change your life." And I said, yeah. And finally, one year, I got
Decided.
so deep in that rut, and I remember I was in an airport waiting for a plane, and I called him. He said, "I knew you'd call sometime."
Yeah. Yeah.
He said, "Here are the tapes to get."
Yeah.
So I got these tapes, and I began to listen to them every day in the car on my way to work. So I'd listen it took me 33 minutes to get to work. So I'd listen for 33 minutes going and 33 minutes coming back.
Yeah.
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 Within a month, it changed my life
Wow.
dramatically.
Wow. Wow.
Within the month, I took the book. I had already written a book called Money, Money, Money for young adults
Yeah.
about understanding capitalism, understanding economics.
Yeah.
And I marched down to the public television station. I convinced the manager that they should let me have a TV program.
Yeah.
So they did, and that was the beginning of TV and then radio and the whole thing. So he was he was a mentor of great importance in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
significant.
And could you remember?
The name.
Yeah. of the tapes that you listened to?
Maybe before we get finished with this, I will remember.
Was it Jim something?
No, I think it was Dennis something.
Yeah, Dennis.
He's
I'll get it for you.
famous.
Yeah?
He had advised astronauts in the early days of space travel
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
to get their heads together. The power of, can't remember. He had a number of tapes.
Yeah.
And they were great tapes because they were not rah-rah.
Okay.
Mhm.
They, wasn't evangelical sort of approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was very logical, very calm, very quiet. And he introduced his listeners to the idea that we have a robot in us.
Yeah.
And when I try to teach young people this concept, I say, you have a robot, and your robot controls you in many respects.
Yeah.
You don't believe me? What's your heartbeat at the moment? What's your blood pressure? What's your blood chemistry? You don't know. Your robot knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your robot's controlling all of that constantly.
Exactly.
Cool.
And your robot controls your moods.
Yeah.
It controls the hormones that go into your system, which control your thoughts,
Yeah.
your attitudes,
Yeah.
your energy level.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't it be nice if you could maybe get in touch with that robot sometime?
That's for sure.
His concept was, yes, you can. You get through self-talk, we all have that voice in our head.
Mm-hmm.
And that voice is saying things like, oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, that's a stupid thing. Oh, that's a wonderful idea. It's talking all the time. And he said, you can control that, and the robot does hear that. It's
Right.
not direct connection to the robot, but it's indirect.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of The Power of the Subconscious Mind. I'm not sure if you
Yeah.
read that
No,
book by
no.
Joseph Murphy. It's the
Yes.
same concept, right?
Same concept.
Yeah.
Same concept. And his point was, you can't just change it overnight, but if you can control your self-talk, because you can hear yourself issue negative thoughts,
Correct.
and you stop it, and you turn that into a positive thought.
Yeah.
And if you do that enough, the robot gradually picks up on that. Gradually picks up.
Uh-huh.
And it begins to help you think more positively about yourself. And anyway, that was a great bit of advice. It helped me tremendously. And it got me out of that rut that I was in after my father killed himself.
Yeah.
And it helped me get rid of that bitterness. And
I-
that bitterness was with me for many years. It
Yeah.
dragged me down and dragged me down and dragged me down. And I finally, after many, many years, got out of that rut through those tapes. And I have revisited that many times since.
Yeah.
And one of the things I realized was I chose to be bitter. I blame my father. No, I chose it.
Yeah.
I chose how I would react. Well, now, when somebody dies, when your father kills himself, of course you're going to react. It's a very powerful blow.
Yeah.
Right.
But to be bitter over the years, and over the years and the years, that's your choice. And I didn't realize that until I went through this revolution in my thinking.
Yeah.
And I came to see that I had chosen to be bitter, and I had filled my head with self-talk
Yeah.
and negative thought, and it had not served me very well. When I got into the tapes, they got me thinking differently,
Mm-hmm.
and I began to see life more positively through better lenses. And so that went on for a number of years, but about 10 years ago, we had another tragedy. We were very close to my wife's sister and her husband. We were like this. We did everything together. We
Yeah.
helped raise their children. She was in our business, our investment business with us. They live a mile away. We socialized. She organized our social events. We were just like that,
Yeah.
constantly. He got up one morning and murdered her,
Wow.
and then blew his own brains out.
Wow. Wow.
It was obviously a huge tragedy for our family, for their children who
Yeah.
were young adult men, for the community. I think 1,000 people came to the memorial.
Wow.
It was just devastating. But I remember on the very day that it happened early in the morning. By the evening, the bodies had been removed from the household, and I was in the household. It was a haunting experience. And I was looking through all of the papers that they had in the house to try to find out why he did this. I thought maybe there was a mistress, maybe they had a financial problem. We never found any reason at all, except that he was a little bit crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, I think he had great depression,
Yeah.
which he disguised.
Mental health.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. But I remember clearly while I was doing that, I said to myself aloud, I said, this is not going to screw up the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You don't have enough years left to be bitter, to be depressed, to be discouraged. You're going to mourn these people. You love them dearly.
Yeah.
But once you're past the mourning, you're going to go on with your life.
Yeah.
And you're going to see life through the very positive lenses that
Yeah.
you put on
Yeah.
those years ago when
Yeah.
you finally escaped the bitterness that your father brought.
Yeah.
That's some powerful
Yeah.
self-talk.
Very, very, very powerful. I
But
couldn't imagine.
it was something that I did on the very day Because something in my head said, wait a minute, you've been through this
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
You're not going to go down that slippery slope.
yeah. So then, how important is mental health then for you, seeing that you went through those strategies before?
Mental health of, say again?
Mental health, like in general, because I'm going through things like that. I can speak from my perspective. For example, where mental health is concerned, it's not really something that is talked about. It's not really something that is advised to dive into.
Always slipped under the rug.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like a taboo
we're ashamed
topic.
of it.
Yeah. It's not really a shame because I reached to the point where I think it's very necessary.
Yeah.
It's good to like read or speak to someone about your problems and stuff like that.
Correct.
But then, how do you go about mental health in general with yourself?
Well, of course, I'm perfectly mentally healthy.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, just going through these experiences alone
Yeah.
could take your life could have taken any turn.
Oh, yes. I think we're getting better at being open about mental health than we used to be. I remember when Dr. Linda Banks came home to Anguilla with her psychology degree and opened a practice. And she said it was very difficult to get clients because if you went to see Dr. Banks, everybody knew that you needed some mental health.
Yeah.
And of course it was difficult. I think we're past that in many respects. People will talk more openly about being depressed and seeking help and getting counseling.
Yeah.
And I would say to your viewers, your listeners, don't be afraid to be open.
Yeah.
If you're having problems, go talk to somebody.
Yes. It's very important.
If you're dealing with a counselor, great, go deal with a counselor and talk about it. I know it's easily said, but it's hard for people to do.
Yeah. And how because you said that you had mentors that stepped into your life at the right time. How important is it for you to be a mentor for other persons?
Well, it's nice of people to let me be a mentor.
Yeah.
I was raised to think that older people had something to offer us. I think it's more difficult for young people to accept that today.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the reasons for that. And I think the prime reason for those attitudes is that the tools that we deal with have changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
I was taught to respect my grandfather.
Yeah.
I knew that he had grown up on a farm with horses. So horses were a much different tool than growing up with tractors, which I did in my youth.
Yeah.
But today, the gap is even greater because you guys and young people are dealing with electronic tools that are so very different from the tools that people my age were raised with.
Yeah.
I could relate to my grandfather because I could remember horses. I could relate to him because after all, it was still farming, it was still getting the hay in, it was still taking care of the animals.
Yeah.
But it's got to be very hard for people in their 20s to relate to somebody 80 because the sort of things I talk about is just totally unfamiliar to them.
Yeah.
Do you think like technology and social media have a huge influence on these things?
It was tremendous influence. I mean, my grandfather could, when radio came along, his father could relate to radio.
Yeah.
And he listened to radio. Television came along, and my grandfather could relate to television.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's fine. Color television came along, so I could relate to color television.
Yeah.
Now the computers have come along, artificial intelligence. a lot of older people can't relate
No.
to that.
True.
No.
It's
That's
not like
true.
watching the
Yeah.
television.
Yeah, that is true.
They can't relate.
Yeah, that is
They
true.
just say, well, that's computer stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the big difference. The gap is much, much greater.
Yeah,
And you're using tools that older people can hardly imagine.
that is true.
That's true.
Yeah, that is
We
true.
had a meeting the other night. Vaughn was there, and my nephew was there, and he's into IT in a big way. And we had older people.
Yeah.
And so we were all discussing a project that we're involved in, and the older people were making notes, and talking about,
Putting it in a letter.
we'll write this and we'll do that, we'll print this out. And meanwhile, the two young guys, they were already working on it on the computer. Boom, 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 boom. They had a spreadsheet, and they had,
PowerPoint.
it was such an illustration of the gap, this tremendous gap.
Yeah.
And some of the older people who were with us were wondering what was going on.
I could imagine, yeah.
But there is a huge generational gap between back then and...
And we can't really bridge that gap between people of my age. I'm 80.
Oh, wow.
I think the gap may dwindle a little bit as we get into people who did at least grow up with computers, and they might be quite different now, but at least they understood it.
Right.
But my older brother, who's only a year and a half older, he never got into computers. He was just the age that he looked at them, and I think basically he said, well, I can get along without learning.
Yeah.
And he never did. And he didn't email. He didn't. He had a great mind. He was an academic, brilliant guy, but he just didn't get into computers.
And something I always wanted to ask you, how did you end up here on a small little island like Statia? Because most people don't even know where
Statia exists.
Yeah. How did you end up here?
Vaughn discovered I had done something terrible, and he blackmailed me.
Wow! So we're gonna take that road.
See how many votes you get
That's a good one.
We're gonna edit that battle.
Well, it was a long road to Statia.
Yeah.
But the short version, if you want the longer version, I'm happy to give you the background. But the short version is that we were spending a lot of time in Anguilla dealing with investments there. And we came to really love Anguilla. But Anguilla became more of a jet-set island than it was when we first came.
Right.
When we first went to Anguilla, it had, I think, one major resort.
Okay.
And
Which one was that?
Malihana.
Malihana. Okay.
That was the first one.
Okay.
And in the years that we were there quite a number of years. Several villas and several bigger resorts got built. Cap Juluca got built. The Cuisinart got built. And so Anguilla, the nature of Anguilla changed a lot. They tried to lure elite, high-end tourism, and they were successful. But I think some of them brought some drug problems with them, and that started a bit of a drug trade in Anguilla.
Drug habits,
Yeah,
with the
then
tourists coming down and stuff.
We got a few gangs forming. There was violence in Anguilla for the first time.
Yeah.
And it didn't frighten us away from Anguilla, but it meant that we probably wouldn't buy land and build there.
Okay.
Especially because the prices of land got so high,
Right.
extraordinarily high.
Yeah.
The jet setters had pushed those prices up. So we just resigned ourselves that maybe we'll keep renting. We had a place year-round that we rented. We said, well, we'll just rent. We don't have to make a commitment here. And then one day we decided we'd like to look at other islands just for the fun of it. We weren't looking to locate. We had no plans to locate to Statia. But we just decided to come over to have a look around for fun.
Yeah.
And we landed here and took a look around, and we said, this looks like Anguilla used to look.
Yeah.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously there were no resorts here in those days.
Correct.
And we said this, we like this because it's the way Anguilla was. It reminds us of our home in upstate New York because we live in a rural area we have a lot of poverty there. Very small villages. Our local village is 450 people or so.
Right.
So it was familiar. And in addition to that, it was 10-10-10. And Anguilla took off when Anguilla broke away from St. Kitts. And there was the Anguillian Revolution.
Yeah.
And finally, at the end of that, Britain stepped in, shared power with the Anguillians. And that's what the Dutch were doing at 10-10-10. They were stepping in, sharing power. And I remember saying to my wife, once the Brits did that to Anguilla, they started pouring in a lot of infrastructure money.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
They built parliament, schools, buildings of all sorts. They funded any number of things. And that helped Anguilla take off.
Yeah.
And I said, I think the Dutch are going to do the same here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to start putting in infrastructure money, which of course they have.
Yeah.
And it's going to help Statia take off. And we're not going to have to worry about it becoming overdeveloped because we'll be in the ground by the time that happens. But it'll be nice to be there if the elevator starts to go up.
Yeah.
And so that enticed us. Land was much less expensive. So we bought the land, we built a house, and we've watched the infrastructure money come in.
Yeah,
All the schools got renovated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
New airport, new roads.
Right.
All kinds of infrastructure. You've seen it.
Right.
And I think that's good for the island in many respects, and it makes a good platform for development.
Yeah.
So then you have to control the development, obviously.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, Tom, often you talk about, how Statia is different from anywhere in the world. You want to share that?
Well, every place has its unique qualities, and the unique qualities in Statia are obviously that it's a tiny island. It has an unusual background, unusual history, that it was a big trading island.
Yeah.
I think it's unusual in that it struggles to have a common language because English is not totally comfortable to a lot of stations.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Dutch is not totally comfortable.
No. Exactly.
Correct. That's correct.
Exactly.
And so it's unique in that sense that it doesn't have a language that everybody's comfortable with. And that's unusual to have.
Yeah.
I pointed out to Vaughn years ago, when the king came, he grabbed the microphone in Wilhelmina Park and he spoke to his people in English.
Yeah.
So here's a Dutch king speaking English perfectly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect English. So things are changing. The younger generation, I think, has got a little more control over the language. And now kids are being taught in English.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is gradually changing. Unique to Statia, I think I discovered this year more than before the friendliness of stations.
Yeah.
There is some reserve you have to break through, but it's very, very rare in Statia, and not so rare in Anguilla, but very rare here for anyone to be rude to us.
Yeah.
True.
Very rude. People are friendly,
Yeah.
and they're genuinely friendly. And if I say hello to anyone, they say hello. Good morning.
That's actually a tradition and a culture I love about Statia. Like sometimes when I go overseas, automatically I'm saying hi to people and they're like,
I go back to Franklin and I'm waiting.
they're like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
But
It happens to you too?
Yeah. All the time.
But it happens all over the place here. If you go to the hospital, and you walk along the corridor, everybody says, good morning, good morning.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely thing. And I just find, I go down to Frankie's, and people are friendly.
Yeah.
And these are tough guys at the bar sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're friendly.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I see teenagers at 11 o'clock at night, they're friendly.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to experience.
I think so too. I
Yeah,
think so
yeah,
too.
yeah.
But a question: how did you two ended up meeting here on the island?
That's a pretty good question.
Do either of us
That was- I think it was a few years ago. It was during New Year's, Old Year's, New Year's time, and I think we were going for dinner. And you guys were just walking out. I think it was like the Old Gin House or something, and then we end up having a brief conversation. I think that's how
Was
how
I
we.
steady on my feet?
That I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you complimented us on well dressed. We just came from church actually.
Yeah,
And then you said, "Hey, I'm Tom," and da 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 da. You live Whitewall, and
yeah.
I think that's
Well,
how
I'm glad
we.
you followed up.
Me too.
And a question for Vaughn: how does it feel? Being able to speak to Tom and have different conversations where you can learn a lot. How does it feel knowing someone like that?
Well, Tom has been a great mentor and inspiration to me over the years. Someone I could certainly, send emails to or hit up whenever I want advice on something. And, like he referred to me last night as his grandson. It's just, it's a great honor to learn from someone who traveled a lot.
Yeah.
Was able to gain a lot of life experience. Basically, on every single project that I undertake and I share with him, he's always so instrumental in where can I help or how can I help.
Yeah.
And it's very rare to find people like that in today's world and today's society. So, I'm really, really grateful for our friendship over the years and the opportunity to meet and know Tom.
It's rare for people to ask, and I would urge anybody in your audience that to ask. People want to share.
Yeah.
There's an old expression that successful people will let you stand on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And certainly I had that experience. That was part of the motivational tape, to build your confidence so that you can approach successful people.
Yeah.
We're so easily intimidated, most of us. We think that if we approach that senior politician or highly successful business person, that person will not really want to take the time.
Yeah.
But in reality, they can be very lonely. You get to the top of a Fortune 500 company, nobody talks to you.
Yeah.
Nobody asks. They all kiss your backside.
Yeah.
They're all afraid of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so does that CEO at the top of that big company want to share any of his wisdom or her wisdom? Very much. They end up writing books.
Yeah.
They want to share what they know, what they've learned, and nobody asks them. They're afraid to.
Yeah.
Even the politicians. Take someone like a Bill Clinton or a President Obama. They're in the limelight, totally in the limelight. Everybody listens to them. Well, why do they write books afterward then?
Right.
Why did they sit down and go through the trouble to write the book? They don't need the money.
Yeah.
Why write the book? Because they're saying in the book, I did it my way and I want to share this with you. I want you to know what was on my mind. I want you to know why I did things.
I actually never thought about that, but that's a pretty
Yeah,
interesting
that
concept. But Tom, you wrote about 3 books.
I was just about to ask about that. 5?
Oh, 5.
5 books.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What are the
brought
names?
Yeah.
What are the names of those books?
The first one was Money, 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 which I talked about earlier.
Right.
I've written a book called Tales of the Empire.
And there's also a play on that.
And there's a play.
Stage,
I created 4 plays. And they are on my website if anybody wants to go to it. tomasinmorgan.com. tomasinmorgan.com. And there are videos of the 4 plays. Those are plays about the tragedy of my father killing himself.
Yeah.
And the name of the hotel he owned was the Empire Hotel. Tales of the Empire is what we called the plays. The book, which is really very similar to the plays, is called Ghosts. Ooh, what is it called? It's got Ghost in the title. But Ghost of the Empire Hotel.
Okay.
What else have I written?
The Last Columnist.
The Last Columnist, which is a novel about a curmudgeon-like old columnist in a small town. Trial in Cooperstown is my latest book. Trial in Cooperstown is about a trial that took place in the village of Cooperstown, not far from where I live.
Yeah.
And I attended the trial and learned all about trials, how they're conducted, jury trials. And simply recorded it, bought the transcript of everything that went on in the trial. And it's a gripping story because trials are gripping.
Yeah,
You don't know how they're going to end.
Yeah.
It has a lot of pathos in it. It's very moving in parts. Trial in Cooperstown. And the last of the 5, if I've gone through all of them, is called Jingles, which is a fun novel.
Okay.
And you can get any of these on Amazon.
Yeah.
Jingles is, I'll set the beginning of the story. Imagine if you wake up tomorrow morning and you hear a jingling in your ear. And then you realize that your friends hear it. And then you realize everybody in the world hears the same sound.
Yeah.
Even submariners, even people on mountaintops, everybody is hearing this sound.
Yeah.
And Jingles is a lighthearted story about what the world goes through to try to discover what this sound is, where it comes from. Is it aliens from outer space? What's going on?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a fun book. It's got some very colorful characters.
Right.
If someone is watching this right now, and let's say they themselves are in a rut, what would be like 3 books that we could recommend to them to say, okay, these are 3 top books that you
The first book I usually recommend is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie. And it was written, I think, in the 20s, maybe the 30s. It's a very old book. It has sold more copies than any other book except the Bible.
Wow.
It keeps getting reprinted and reprinted. It is just an evergreen, popular book because it deals with issues that never get old.
Yeah.
So How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. It's on Amazon. It's easy to acquire.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful book. It is a primer, a basic book on human nature. And I think it's as pertinent today as it was the day it was written.
Yeah.
That's a book I recommend. I'm trying to think of other books. What books have I recommended to you?
You gave me this book, A Success Story, with Warren Buffett's partner.
Oh, yes.
Business partner.
Charlie Munger.
Yeah. That's a pretty cool read.
Well, Warren Buffett gets a lot of publicity because he's, of course,
in the forefront.
One of the great investment gurus.
Yeah.
And he's a very popular figure, but he has a partner named Charlie Munger, who is even older, I think. He's well into his 90s.
Yeah.
And Charlie avoids the limelight. And his book is not as popular as Buffett's, but it's profound in many ways, and it's well worth reading. He's just a wise, savvy man, not just an investor. He writes about human nature.
Yeah.
And working backward.
Yes. Yes. He wrote a very moving comment, anyway, about addictions, and I was interested because my father was addicted to gambling.
Okay.
That's why he committed suicide. He lost all his money gambling on horses and killed himself. And Charlie Munger had a just a very poignant comment about addictions. What other books?
There's so many.
As soon as we're finished, I'll remember a bunch.
Right.
What was one book for Vaughn? What was one book that really like changed your way of thinking?
In general, or
Yeah,
recommended from top? The first book I ever read, The Magic of Thinking Big, you know, it just stretched my whole mindset. Like, you could actually achieve different things. Like, you don't have to live the status quo.
Yeah.
You know, go to school, get a job, blah, blah, blah. Like, you actually own a business.
Yeah.
You could actually do whatever you think, feel, or have the ability to do, or even imagine, just simply by, you know, paying attention to life. And, you know, I think once you pay attention to life, life will pay attention to you.
Yeah.
So that book for sure. What about you?
Me, the first book that I read that I can remember.
That changed your life?
First book that changed my life. It might sound like most people say the same thing. I think it was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Okay.
It was.
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, by Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes, that's a wonderful book.
For me, that book changed my perspective on how I thought about a lot of things.
Right.
And that is the book that spiraled, me reading. I just went into a non-stop reading spree after that.
Oh, really?
But it actually first came from, I had an uncle that passed away. And he was from my understanding, from what I know, is he read almost every book in the library.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that, when he passed away, for something just hit me. And I just started reading. But I like to read like self-help books. So I think it just impacted me in a way that I just started.
Yeah. I think that's how we connected, actually.
Yeah,
talking about books as well.
Yeah. So
Well, to
books and
viewers
business
and
books.
listeners, reading.
Yeah.
Wonderful
Exactly.
One of the great books I read, and I think it was by Napoleon Hill, I think.
Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich.
The Law of Success in 16 Lessons.
Say again?
The Law of Success in 16 Lessons. I think that was the original copy before they watered it down into the... Was it that one? Or?
I think Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
And Earl Nightingale has written some wonderful
Correct.
stuff. Earl
The
Nightingale.
strangest secret in the world.
Yes, it's a wonderful...
You listen to the... Earl Nightingale?
No. He was the greatest voice ever on the radio, I think.
Yeah.
It was... But yes, he had a wonderful sense of timing in his presentations. He was on the radio for many years. But The Strangest Secret is a wonderful...
Yeah.
And it's also in the genre. I remember a comment that I think it was from a British motivator. It was, he who conquers fear conquers all. And it's caused me to pay attention to fear. Fear, his thesis was that fear probably plays an enormous role in all of our lives. And I think it does.
Yeah.
We are afraid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And overcoming fear is a major, major challenge for us. And I usually use an exaggerated version of fear to help people understand this. And I say to them, what if you had the opportunity to borrow, to sign the loan agreement, to be responsible for paying back what you borrow, and you had the opportunity to borrow $100 million?
Yeah.
Well, I can't do that. Borrow $100 million? I say, yes, you borrow $100 million. You have the opportunity to borrow, and you have to pay 5% interest on this money that you borrow. But at the same time, you know that you could invest $100 million in U.S. Treasury bonds, guaranteed by the government of the United States, that will pay you 5.25%.
Yeah.
So here's your opportunity. You can borrow $100 million, you owe it back, You have to pay 5% interest, but you could invest it in bonds that pay 5.25%.
Yeah.
A no-brainer. Would you do it? No. Because they're afraid. What are you afraid of? Well, that's so much money. I mean, what if? So what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
These are two guarantees. The U.S. government will guarantee 5.25%, and all you're paying is 5%. You have to make money on $100 million. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
They fear. We fear so much. We're afraid, and we don't even realize we're afraid.
Yeah.
But if we listen to ourselves, our self-talk, we can catch ourselves being afraid. And that's something worth trying to overcome. Because I suspect Vaughn has very few fears. I suspect both of you have very few fears because you are undertaking ventures in which you can lose money.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Go bankrupt.
Yeah.
If you get sick, who's going to attend to the business? Those are all fears.
Yeah.
And if you say to most people, why don't you start a restaurant? Well, fears. We can overcome our fears. He who conquers fears conquers all.
So,
you go ahead.
no, okay. So how? Well, I don't know if you want to ask a different question or similar.
No.
Because sometimes
Yeah,
we think similar. But how important would you say choosing or selecting your life partner plays a role in your success journey?
I think we have the same brain.
Yeah, I know, right? It happens a lot.
I was gonna say the same thing. Yeah.
You repeated that.
I was gonna go somewhere around that.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference.
Okay.
Huge difference. And it did in my life.
Yeah.
I was married for 18 years, and there were many good things about it, and there were many bad things which caused the divorce.
Correct.
And it was as much my fault as hers, I suppose. It's water over the bridge.
Yeah.
But my second choice made a big difference. Your partner is very, very, very important. And also it's important to determine what roles you're going to play.
Yeah.
Because there are some very successful marriages in which the partners really tend to their own business and they don't have much to do with each other, but they're successful. That's how they wanted to operate.
Yeah.
They're very independent type of people.
Yeah.
But if you are a person who feels you need a partner, who prefers to have an assistant, to share in your thinking, then be very careful about how you choose your partner and make sure that partner is someone who's going to support and share. Makes such a difference.
And what do you think about the company you have around you? For example,
friends.
Yeah, friends and just different people you know. What is important? Because a lot of times they say that you see online they say a lot that if you're around 4 persons and 4 broke person, you'll be the 5th one.
Yeah, like you're the average of your 5 best friends.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, choose people. I think it's very important to be faithful to your very old friends.
Yeah.
Friends from your youth.
Mm-hmm.
I have great affection for people I grew up with, went to high school with. And some of them were not successful in any way. But I love them dearly and have great memories of them and kept in contact. Of course, most of them are dead now.
Right.
But yeah, your friends can be very important. If you choose mediocre friends, you're going to be surrounded by mediocre ideas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose people you admire, people whose minds are strong and full of ideas, they will certainly influence and help you.
Yeah.
I find over the latter years, more than when I was younger, choosing to associate with minds that are much more powerful than mine.
Yeah.
with people.
I think
who
we
are
spoke about
much
that the other
more
day.
successful than me, I think is very helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
And then listening to them,
Yes.
Right.
develop the art of listening. It touches on what I was talking about earlier, the CEO who wants to share.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We all want to share. So if you're going to ask someone to share, ask someone who's had experiences that you have not.
Exactly. Exactly.
Ask
Exactly.
someone who has been a superior performer.
Yeah.
I use an example, Peter Barnhorn,
Mhm.
Yeah.
who has developed the resort here.
Yes.
He is a most unusual person, most unusual thinker,
Yeah.
and he has achieved tremendous results in his business.
Yeah.
He has a rose growing business.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tremendous. Well, he's worth listening to. It's worth listening to because he thinks differently than most anybody you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outside
yeah.
of the box.
Exactly.
Unconventional.
Exactly.
It's unconventional. It's just a different. He is like an Elon Musk. He is like a Ted Turner who created CNN.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He is like Richard Branson
Virgin
who created
Atlantic.
Virgin.
Atlantic, yeah.
He's like Donald Trump, and I say that without getting into politics. Politics is another matter, but Trump as a business
Yeah.
person, as a creator of an empire,
Mhm.
You can't take that away for sure. Yeah.
he thinks differently than anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one quote I like from Donald Trump. It says, "You're going to be thinking anyway. You might as well think big."
Well, true.
You know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it makes
yeah.
sense.
True. So associate and listen to people whose thinking is, you think, probably superior to
Yeah.
yours, or certainly different
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of free advice, which is good and valuable advice,
Yeah.
if you only will listen.
That's true. That is true. And you said you have an investment company. What are some things that you typically invest in?
We were in the field of helping people manage their investments,
Mm-hmm.
and it was conventional in the advice that we gave. It was very traditional advice on how to invest, and our job was to listen to the clients carefully, and to hear what they were worried about,
Mhm.
to hear what it is they wanted to achieve with their investments, to hear the things that they feared, and then to fashion an investment package that fit what it was we heard. It's, you know, if you were a tailor, a high quality tailor, you do several fittings. You because you want to get the contours of, if you're making a suit, a $10,000 suit
Yeah,
for
yeah.
someone, you get the contours of the body just right. You get the movements, you get the muscular, you get all kinds of things to shape this. And a good investment advisor listens carefully and then shapes the package of investments
Yeah.
to suit what the person has shared. So our service was to do just that. The reason we were very successful, and we were, was that I had my radio show and my newspaper column.
Okay.
So I was known to a few million people.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we would go to a city where I was on the radio, a city where my column was in the weekly newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
and we would offer to have a financial and investment seminar,
Yeah.
and we'd be overwhelmed with the response because people had heard me on the radio or seen me on television,
Right.
and so they trusted us more.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so that was very, very helpful. That was a form of marketing that not many investment advisors had,
Right.
and it was very helpful.
Do you see that concept being duplicated today?
It is and it's not. The reason it's not in many cases is because the big investment firms don't want their advisors going on the radio or on television.
Okay.
Because they don't want, like Morgan Stanley does not want one of their advisors saying, I think there's a depression coming.
Yeah.
Because the viewers and the listeners would say, aha, Morgan Stanley says so-and-so.
Right.
So Morgan Stanley doesn't want their investment people on. But I lucked out.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an investment company, and it was under Morgan Stanley. It was part of Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley had 600 offices. Ours was the only office devoted to just one practice.
Oh.
Our practice.
Yeah.
And the reason we were able to have that and to grow is that I started with a company called E.F. Hutton. Hutton was a famous investment firm.
Okay.
And when Hutton invited me to become an investment advisor,
Yeah.
because I had my radio show, I had my TV show, and newspaper column, I said to them, okay, I'll become an advisor, but I want to be able to keep my radio show.
Yeah.
And my column, my newspaper column, and my TV. And they said, yeah, that's not a problem. I said, I want it in writing.
Business 101.
Yeah.
So the guy said, okay. So he did it in writing. So bingo, E.F. Hutton got taken over by Shearson.
Yeah.
Became Shearson Hutton or something. And the new guys came in, and they sent their auditors around and their compliance people, and they said, oh, you got a radio show. You can't have a radio show. I said, yes, I can.
I've been in writing.
And they said, well, we'll check with New York on that. They never got back.
Yeah.
And then that company got taken over by American Express.
Yeah.
And they sent their guys around. They said, oh, you can't have a radio show or TV show. I said, yes, I can. I've got it in writing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And American Express got taken over by Travelers, and Travelers said, you can't have a radio show. I got it in writing. So by the time Morgan Stanley came along, and they said, you can't have a show, and I said, I've got it in writing.
Yeah.
We were pretty big.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're big enough to have our own office.
Yeah.
But that was dead luck that I got it in writing.
Yeah.
If
Wow.
I hadn't, then they would have ended the
Exactly. I really don't think I have any other questions that can come into my mind. I wanted to know maybe if there's something you want to leave with the listeners that are watching.
Yes, Vaughn and I often talk about prospects. What prospects do people have on a tiny island that is isolated?
Yeah.
And there are some obvious prospects, that is, get off the island, get good education somewhere. But I think today it becomes a little bit easier to, if you're interested in business, to become international, to become regional.
Yeah.
It's a little easier in some fields than it used to be.
Yeah.
When we think of a business or a service, we tend to think of local. But
Right.
let's look at your service.
Yeah.
You have a service of video,
Yeah.
and we were one of your customers.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
did a magnificent job.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, there used to be a famous photographer in Canada.
Yeah.
People would travel 15,000 miles to have him make their portraits.
Yeah.
He was that famous.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to leave Canada. You, for instance, someone with your service,
Yeah.
could become so famous among jet setters that you could provide that service all over the world.
Yeah.
Now,
True.
if that seems like an exaggeration, consider this. My daughter lives in Telluride, Colorado.
Yeah.
There's a big ski center. It's got lots of millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires who own property in Telluride. They come there for the skiing, and it's a big social swirl.
Yeah.
So Telluride is a small town, but anyway, lots of celebrities. My daughter has developed a business of taking care of the last-minute dress adjustments for weddings.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that was much of a niche. But the weddings that take place in Telluride people spend $300,000
Wow.
on.
Yeah.
They're billionaires.
Yeah.
They live in huge mansions up in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
They fly everybody in by jet.
Yeah.
They fly an orchestra in.
Mm-hmm.
They fly a caterer in,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
a famous chef,
Yeah.
and they spend, as I say, $300,000-400,000 or more on a wedding.
Yeah.
Right.
They want the dresses to be perfect.
Exactly.
They want everything to be perfect. She has a business going up and assessing all of the wedding gowns, the bridal women's
Yeah.
gowns, the men's clothing. She makes last-minute adjustments. She tucks and pulls and puts frills on, does all of this stuff, and charges a huge amount.
Yeah.
She'll get paid $3,000-4,000 just
Wow.
for tending to these details at the wedding because they want every detail to be
Exactly.
perfect.
Yeah.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So imagine providing your services to weddings of celebrities.
Yeah.
They get married in Monte Carlo. Where's Jacques?
Yeah.
They have to fly him in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jacques says, I'm very tied up. I don't know if I can do a Monte Carlo wedding. If I come, it disrupts everything. I will have to charge you $50,000.
Yeah.
Done.
Right.
I'm on my way.
So my point is, in this
Yeah.
era,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's easier to do that. In this era, you could, living in Statia,
Yeah.
you could become an internationally famous wedding videographer
That is true.
Right.
whose
That is
services would
especially
be
with social
in
media.
great
Yeah.
demand, and you could, using the tools of today, you could build up your reputation.
Yeah.
You could start with weddings that will be staged out at the resort here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you could do the networking and become so famous, and you could live right here and do it from here because
Yeah.
you
True.
can do all the editing here,
Yeah. That is true. That is true. That is true.
So if we go back 30 years, that was not practical.
No.
It just wasn't. There was too much equipment involved, and travel was too slow, and
Yeah.
communications were. But now you can do it, and you can send them unedited versions, and you can send them.
Yeah.
You can just do it. Bingo,
Yeah.
they can see it.
Yeah.
So it's an example of, I think, opportunities that have opened up in this electronic age.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So for young people, for people thinking of having a business, they want to get big with a business, want to get beyond the boundaries of Statia, I think it's more possible than it used to be.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And it's also possible, to go offshore, to go to the Netherlands or elsewhere, learn something, learn a business or a service or a skill,
Correct.
and come back.
Correct.
Because we all know there's so many people now who are working at home
Yeah.
because COVID
COVID,
pushed us
Exactly.
into that.
Exactly.
And so it's easier for people who are not necessarily entrepreneurial. They can go acquire a skill, work for a company overseas, and then say, I'm going to work from Statia from now on.
Yeah.
And the company says, well, we don't care.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
We don't care if
Yeah.
you're working from your kitchen. As
Yeah.
long
That's
as
true.
Do the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. I think that would be a dream job right there, where you could work from anywhere.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and there's more and more of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've had relatives visit here, and they're still working. They're working every day.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're staying here on vacation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So it's there are opportunities. There are always opportunities. But I expect next time I see you,
That's the goal.
you'll be a multimillionaire.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
You'll know
That's the
all
goal.
of the big stars and
Right,
celebrities.
right,
They'll be
right.
flying you on their private jets.
That's the goal. That's the goal. That's what I'm hoping for. But that's what I'm working towards. Let me put it that
That's
way.
good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
a good
yeah.
initiative.
Yeah. But I also wanted to thank you for letting me do this interview. Also, at the same time, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to do the videos and the pictures, because I don't think you know how big of impact that had on me
good.
doing that. And it really somehow really helped my business. I don't know, it did something to my mindset being here alone and yeah, just seeing that. And I always get compliments for taking the pictures and showing. When I show it to people, they are amazed of what like
Real
produced
estate
over here.
photography.
Yeah. So
Well, yeah, for people listening and watching this, Shaquille did videos of our property here. And he had his drones going through the house.
Precision.
Into my clothes closet. But he did a magnificent job.
Yeah.
Beautifully edited and beautifully created. Really a world-class production.
thank you.
So any billionaires having a big wedding coming up, this is the guy.
Yeah, thank you. You heard it from you heard it from
it
Tom.
first.
You heard it from Tom. Thank you for letting me do this, guys. If you want to listen to this, of course, I do this also on Spotify, so you don't necessarily have to watch the episode. You can also listen while you cook, you clean, you whatever you're doing. You can listen to the episode, and share the episode as much as possible. This was something different, something that I was very much interested in. I'm glad to hear your story, and I see you guys in the next episode. Bless. Thank you.
Thank you.